Her mail-order fiancé was nothing the Duchess wanted, but his talent saved her failing ranch. Before we begin this beautiful period romance story, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I love knowing where you're joining me from. Margaret Hollister had not expected the knock. It came just after sunrise, sharp and decisive, echoing through the drafty hallway of the ranch house. She froze at the breakfast table, fingers tightening around her cup. No one respectable called this early. No one with good intentions arrived unannounced. For a brief, wild moment she hoped it was a mistake, a traveler seeking water, a neighbor seeking help. Anything except what she feared. Mrs. Weaver, the housekeeper, peeked in from the corridor. Her expression carried a hint of amusement beneath the usual disapproval. "Miss Margaret, he's here." Margaret's breath caught. "He? Your fiancé?" Margaret felt the word travel through her like cold water. She rose too quickly, her skirt brushing the chair. "He isn't supposed to arrive until next month." "Well," Mrs. Weaver muttered, "perhaps he found a faster horse." Margaret tried to compose herself, smoothing her hair, straightening the collar of her dress, reminding herself she was the daughter of an English duchess, and the late Jeremiah Hollister, one of Texas's most respected ranchers. Dignity, grace, self-control, that was what she needed. But as she reached the door, none of it seemed enough. She stepped onto the porch hoping to see a gentleman, a polished man in a long coat, boots that gleamed in the morning light, posture straight, chin high, someone who reflected her upbringing, her mother's teachings, the society that watched her every step. Instead, a tall man stood at the base of the steps, hat in hand, hair mussed from travel, boots scuffed from long roads. His coat carried the dust of miles. His stance was steady but humble, almost apologetic. And his hands, dear Lord, were rough, calloused, the hands of a laborer. He was nothing like the refined gentleman she had imagined during their correspondence. He lifted his eyes to hers. They were warm, steady, and unexpectedly calm. "Miss Hollister, I'm Elias Carter." She heard his voice, low, clear, unhurried, and felt her heart sink. Not because it was unpleasant, but because it carried none of the polish she had been raised to expect in a husband. The disappointment struck so quickly, she barely managed a polite nod. "You arrived earlier than expected," she said, forcing the tightness from her throat. "I took the stagecoach that left 2 weeks ahead of schedule," he replied. "Figured it was best to come sooner, seeing as the ranch might need help." Margaret stiffened at the implication. "My ranch is standing." "Thank you." He studied her for a moment, not challengingly, but with the kind of quiet attention that made her suddenly aware of every flaw in the porch, every cracked board, every trace of wear. She felt exposed in a way she had not anticipated. "I meant no offense," Elias said gently. "Just wanted to be useful." Mrs. Weaver coughed behind her, a subtle reminder to invite him inside. Margaret stepped aside. "You must be tired. Please, come in." Elias nodded gratefully and entered, removing his hat but clearly uncertain of where to place it. Mrs. Weaver relieved him of it with the efficient air of someone who had made peace with the unexpected long ago. The silence that followed was awkward. Margaret offered tea, which he accepted with a polite thanks, though he appeared more comfortable holding the cup with both hands than sipping from it. She tried to make conversation. "I trust your journey was smooth." "Smooth enough," he said. "Long. Gave me time to think." "Oh? About what?" "About what kind of life I'd be walking into." His eyes met hers again, steady and sincere. "About the woman I'd promised to marry." Margaret's throat tightened. She had nothing equally honest to offer. She had imagined an aristocratic suitor, someone who reminded her of the world she had left behind before her father dragged her to Texas, someone whose refinement would shield her from gossip, judgment, and social ruin. Not a former blacksmith with wind-burned cheeks and travel-torn boots. She lifted her chin. "I hope the reality is not disappointing." His expression softened. "Different, but not disappointing." The warmth in his voice caught her off guard. She looked away quickly. Mrs. Weaver returned, clearing her throat with authority. "The horses will need feeding shortly, Miss Margaret." Margaret nodded, grateful for the interruption. "Yes, of course." Elias perked up slightly. "Horses, may I see them?" The question tightened every muscle in her body. The stables, the place she had avoided showing anyone for months. Her father's death, the drought, the unpaid workers, everything had left the ranch stretched thin. The horses were underfed, the fences weakened, the paddocks dusty and empty. It was the greatest embarrassment of her life. She forced a polite smile. "They're in poor condition at the moment." "I won't judge," he said kindly. "Horses don't bother me. Never have." "That's not the issue," she retorted more sharply than intended. He studied her again, and she hated how gentle his gaze remained. "I'm here to help," he said quietly. "If you'll let me." Margaret drew in a slow breath, battling the sting of humiliation. She had brought this man here to save her reputation, her ranch, her future. And now she feared he would see too clearly how desperately she needed saving. She lifted her skirts and stepped off the porch. "Very well. Follow me." They walked side by side, though Margaret kept a measured distance. The morning sun revealed every broken board, every sagging beam of the stable roofs. Elias said nothing, but she could feel him taking it all in. Each silent second deepened her embarrassment. At the first stall, a chestnut mare lifted her head weakly. Margaret's heart clenched. She whispered almost defensively, "Feed shortages. Temporary." Elias nodded but didn't comment. He approached the mare slowly, placing a gentle hand on her muzzle. The horse leaned into his touch with surprising trust. "She's a sweet one," he murmured. "She needs steady meals and a bit of calm." Margaret swallowed hard. "I know what she needs." "I didn't mean to suggest you didn't," he said softly. She turned away, ashamed of her own sharpness. They continued deeper into the stables until they reached the last stall. Inside stood a dark stallion, restless and broad-chested. He pawed the ground anxiously, ears flicking at every sound. Elias paused. "He's spirited." Margaret crossed her arms. "That is the polite word. He hasn't let anyone touch him since my father died. No trainer could handle him." Elias stepped closer to the stall door. "May I?" Her pulse quickened. "It isn't safe." He looked at her calmly. "I'll be careful." She hesitated, torn between fear, pride, and the dread that he might fail, or worse, succeed, proving her own helplessness. But something in his quiet confidence disarmed her. "Very well," she whispered. Elias pushed the stall door open and stepped inside. The stallion tossed his head, muscles tense, breath sharp and uneven. Margaret's heart hammered. She reached instinctively for the wooden railing, knuckles whitening. Elias spoke softly, a low murmur she could barely hear. The stallion shifted, uncertain. Elias took another step, slow and deliberate. Margaret felt the air tighten around her. And then, something she could not explain, something she had not seen in months. The stallion stilled. Elias lifted a hand toward the animal's neck. His fingers were inches away. Margaret's breath caught as the stallion exhaled, the first sign of calm in ages. Elias looked back at her, voice quiet but confident. "If you trust me, Miss Hollister, I can help him." Margaret stared, torn between disbelief and fear. Elias stepped even closer to the stallion. When he reached out to touch the animal's mane, the stallion did not pull away. Margaret's world tilted. Elias turned to her. "Let me take responsibility for retraining him." She opened her mouth, but no words formed. He waited. Margaret's heart pounded as she realized this decision could change everything. Elias took a careful breath. "Miss Hollister, may I handle this horse?" Margaret did not answer right away. Her breath came shallow, her fingers cold against the wooden rail. Elias waited with the patience of a man who had spent his life reading animals more easily than people. The stallion shifted again, but not with fear, more as though he too was waiting for her decision. At last she managed to speak. "If you believe you can do it, then yes, you may try." Elias nodded once, a simple acknowledgement, yet steady enough to ease some of the tightness in her chest. He turned back toward the stallion, murmuring a few quiet words before stepping out of the stall. Margaret realized she had not taken a full breath since he entered. He approached her, brushing dust from his hands. "I'll do nothing reckless," he said. "I know my limits." Margaret met his gaze, surprised by the sincerity there. "Most men in Texas do not know those." "As it happens," he replied, "I'm not from Texas." That earned from her the smallest, most unwilling curve of a smile. Elias seemed to notice, though he politely did not mention it. She motioned for him to follow her out of the stables. We should discuss what comes next. There are many issues on this ranch. The horses are only one. Elias walked beside her. I saw enough to understand that. But I'd like to know your priorities. My priorities, she muttered, are survival. Then, realizing how bare the confession sounded, she added quickly, financial survival, that is. He nodded, not mocking, not chastising. I can help with the horses. They're my start. But if you'll tell me what else needs attention, I'm willing to learn the rest. His tone surprised her again. She had expected a man who would arrive with opinions, advice, perhaps even pride. Instead, he sounded ready, willing, almost grateful for the chance. They walked toward the main house. Margaret kept her chin high, trying to stay composed. Still, her mind churned. The arrival of her mail-order fiancé was supposed to bring stability, but Elias Carter was not the stable, polished gentleman she had planned for. He changed the air around her. He made her feel seen in ways that unsettled her. Inside, Mrs. Weaver had already set out fresh tea. Years in the Hollister household had trained her to anticipate every awkward pause before it formed. Margaret sat at the small table, motioning for Elias to join her. Before we discuss the ranch, we must address something else. Our arrangement. He took the seat opposite her, hands clasped loosely before him. I know this isn't the marriage you expected. She straightened. I expected a gentleman from Boston, someone with a quiet mind and impeccable manners, someone who understood society. Instead, Elias said with a hint of amusement, you got me. She flushed. I did not mean to insult you. I'm not insulted, he said gently. Just making sure we're speaking truth. She hesitated, unsure how to respond. Few people dared speak to her so plainly. It felt strange, unsettling, and yet refreshing. Elias leaned back slightly. This was a transaction on both sides. You needed someone to help secure the ranch. I needed a place where I could start over. Neither of us pretended it was a grand romance. That may be, she admitted, but appearances matter here. People judge harshly. He tilted his head. Do they judge you because you're a woman running a ranch, or because you're trying to save one? She blinked. Both. A long pause followed. Elias's eyes softened with something she did not want to name. Pity, perhaps, or understanding. She didn't like either. She cleared her throat. Regardless, we must proceed cautiously. I can't have neighbors assuming things about you, or about me. He nodded. Then tell me how you want to proceed. Margaret took a breath. We will not announce the engagement until the ranch improves. For now you are a hired hand, or perhaps a horse trainer. Elias accepted this without complaint. Whatever you believe is best. That was unexpected. Most men she knew would have bristled at such an arrangement. Elias simply accepted it. She studied him for a moment, puzzled by his ease. He rose from his chair. If you'll excuse me, I'd like to get back to the horses. Margaret stood as well. I should look over the accounts. They walked out together, though not side by side. A comfortable distance remained between them, yet something new lingered in the space, a quiet awareness neither dared name. At the stables, Elias gathered tools from an old storage chest. Margaret remained near the doorway, unable to leave. She still felt uneasy from earlier, when he had walked into the stall with a confidence she could barely comprehend. He glanced up and noticed her lingering. You don't have to watch me. I'll be all right. It is not you I worry about, she said. It is the horse. Then I'll be gentle, he replied. I always am. He moved with calm certainty. He handled the latches, the lead ropes, the brushes, all with movements that suggested years of familiarity. Margaret watched, more curious than she wished to admit. A few ranch hands passed by, whispering under their breath. One of them paused near Margaret. That new fellow of yours, he murmured. Think he's up to the task? She straightened. Mr. Carter is skilled. If you have doubts, keep them to yourself. The man nodded quickly and hurried away. Margaret turned back toward Elias, cheeks warm from irritation. Elias approached the stallion's door again. You can stay if you like, he said, or you can go finish your work. I'll call for you if anything changes. I'll stay, she said without thinking. He said nothing more, only opened the stall door with cautious precision. This time, Margaret saw something she had missed earlier. Elias didn't force dominance over the animal. He didn't try to tame the horse with pressure or intimidation. He simply offered a steady presence, waiting for permission rather than demanding it. She whispered, "How did you learn this?" He stayed focused on the horse, by working with men who lacked patience. Someone had to balance them. The stallion tossed his head again. Elias stepped slowly closer. "How you know," Margaret said quietly. "My father believed that a man must show a horse who holds authority." "I don't discredit that," Elias replied, voice calm. "But trust lasts longer than authority." She looked down. "Then perhaps I've never earned either." He paused but did not look back. "You've held this ranch together alone for months. That's not authority or trust. That's courage." She swallowed hard, unable to respond. No one had spoken to her like that since her father's death. Elias extended a hand again toward the stallion. His voice softened. "Easy now, I'm right here." The stallion's ears twitched. His muscles rippled with uncertainty, but he did not rear or kick. Slowly, so slowly, Margaret almost doubted her eyes. The animal stepped forward. Elias brushed his fingers along the horse's mane. The stallion trembled but did not retreat. Margaret felt something strange stir in her chest. Relief, hope, awe. She whispered, "How did you do that?" He replied without looking at her. "He's not angry, he's lonely. Horses feel lost too." The words struck her harder than she expected. The stallion eased its head down. Elias stroked its neck with gentle, measured movements. Margaret watched, torn between admiration and a suddenly painful awareness of how little she understood about the man she had brought into her life. Minutes passed in silence. Finally, Elias stepped back from the stall with a calm expression. "He'll come around fully," he said. "Give me time." Margaret nodded. "You surprised me." "I usually do," he said lightly. She blinked at the unexpected humor. Before she could respond, footsteps sounded behind them. Mrs. Weaver appeared, looking puzzled. "Miss Margaret, you have a visitor." Margaret stiffened. "Who?" "A neighbor. Wants to discuss your father's old contracts." Her stomach dropped. "Now?" Mrs. Weaver nodded. "He says it's urgent." Margaret closed her eyes briefly. Another strain. Another reminder that she was still fighting to keep the ranch out of greedy hands. She turned back to Elias. "This ranch is in worse condition than you realize. People are waiting for it to fall." Elias met her gaze steadily. "Then we won't let it." The words were simple, but they sounded like a promise she had longed to hear without admitting it. Mrs. Weaver's voice carried again. "Miss Margaret, he's waiting." Margaret inhaled slowly. "Very well, I'll speak with him." She turned, but Elias stepped forward slightly. "Margaret, if you need me—" "I'll manage," she said quickly, wishing her voice didn't tremble. She walked toward the house. Her steps were steady, but her thoughts spun wildly. Elias was nothing she wanted, and yet in the stables he had shown a strength she could not ignore. She reached the porch, but before she entered, she looked back once more. Elias stood by the stallion, his silhouette framed by the open stable door, one hand resting calmly on the horse's neck. It struck her then, a sudden, unnerving thought. He might be the one person capable of saving her ranch, but she did not know if she could trust him with her heart. And as she stepped inside to face her neighbor, her pulse quickened with new unease, because for the first time she feared Elias Carter might change her life more than she ever intended. And just as she took a step toward the parlor, Mrs. Weaver whispered the words that froze her mid-stride. "Margaret, he insists on buying the ranch." Margaret entered the parlor with her pulse beating too quickly. Mr. Alden, one of the neighboring ranchers who had always eyed her land with greedy politeness, stood near the window, hat in hand, expression arranged into something that looked sympathetic but felt like calculation. "Miss Hollister," he said, bowing slightly, "my apologies for the early call." "You rarely apologize for anything," she replied, keeping her posture firm. "What brings you here?" He smiled, the kind of smile that always made her guard rise. "A matter of mutual benefit. I heard you brought on a new hand. A fiancé from out east, is that right?" Margaret stiffened. "My personal affairs are not open for discussion." "Of course. Forgive my curiosity." He walked slowly around the room, studying the worn furniture, the fading curtains. "The Hollister Ranch is a fine piece of land, but it's no secret you've faced difficulties. She tightened her hands behind her back. "Difficulties I intend to overcome." Alden sighed dramatically. "And I hope you do, but in case you realize the burden is greater than anticipated, I thought it best to offer assistance before the bank steps in." She looked directly at him. "Speak plainly." He stopped pacing and faced her. "I want to buy your ranch." Her jaw clenched. "It is not for sale. Everything is for sale when debts pile high enough." "I am aware of my situation," she said coldly, "but I will resolve it myself." He raised a brow. "With the help of your fiancé." She felt heat rise in her cheeks. "That is none of your concern." Alden set his hat on a nearby table and folded his arms. "Look, Miss Hollister, you're a capable young woman. But the ranch is failing. Everyone sees it. The fences, the cattle count, the horses, especially the horses. Rumor is one of them has gone wild. That rumor is exaggerated." "Is it?" he asked with feigned innocence. "Because word travels fast, and investors get nervous when they hear that a property is in decline." Margaret's voice sharpened. "If you came here to intimidate me, you've wasted your morning." "I came here," he replied, "to spare you the disgrace of losing everything publicly. Sell to me now, and I'll ensure you have a comfortable future." She lifted her chin. "No." Alden held her gaze for a long, quiet moment. Then he retrieved his hat. "Very well. But I hope you know what you're risking." She did. More than he could imagine. When he left, Margaret stayed still for a moment, letting the tension ease from her shoulders. Then she walked out to the porch and inhaled slowly. The morning air offered no comfort. Behind her, soft footsteps approached. Elias. He stopped a few feet away. "I saw him leaving. Trouble. Nothing I can't handle," she said, though her voice betrayed her. Elias studied her carefully. "He came to pressure you, didn't he?" She hesitated. "He wants to buy the ranch. He thinks I'm close to losing it." Elias exhaled slowly. "You didn't consider it, did you?" His tone wasn't accusatory, just concerned. And that made it worse. "Of course not," she said. "This ranch is my father's legacy." Elias nodded once. "Then we'll keep it standing." She looked away. "You speak as though it's simple." "It isn't," he said, "but it's possible." She didn't know why she felt steadier hearing him say that. She shouldn't depend on him. Not emotionally, not even practically. Yet his calm assurance settled something inside her. "May I see the stallion again?" he asked. "There's more work to be done." She gestured for him to follow. They walked side by side to the stables. The ranch hands who had been lingering earlier stepped out of the way, watching Elias with curiosity. Word was spreading. Something about the newcomer stirred whispers. Margaret entered the stables first, drawn to the dark stall. The stallion paced restlessly, ears flicking toward them. Elias stepped beside her. "He remembers me. Is that good or bad?" "Depends what he remembers." He opened the stall door with deliberate slowness. Margaret gripped the railing again, unable to stop herself. Elias took a few steps forward, murmuring something too soft to catch. The stallion's muscles tightened, but he didn't retreat. His eyes fixed on Elias with a strange, uneasy recognition. Margaret whispered, "Be careful." He didn't turn around. "I always am." With patient, measured movements, he lifted a rope and let it hang loosely in his hand. Not threatening, not demanding. The stallion snorted, stamping the ground. Elias didn't move closer. He simply waited. Margaret frowned. "Why aren't you approaching him?" "Because he's waiting to see what I'll do with the rope," Elias said. "If I show control too quickly, he'll resist. If I show fear, he'll mistrust me. He wants to know my intentions." She watched in silence as the stallion slowly eased his head forward, curiosity stirring beneath caution. Elias extended the rope just slightly, not enough to startle the horse. The stallion leaned in, sniffing it. Margaret couldn't look away. "You understand them," she whispered. "In ways I've never seen." Elias spoke softly. "Horses are honest creatures. They don't pretend. They don't hide their fears. That's why I trust them." She didn't mean to ask it, but the question slipped out. "Do you trust people?" His hands paused, barely perceptible. "Sometimes." She swallowed. "Do you trust me?" He hesitated longer this time. "I'm learning to." Something warm and unsettling spread through her chest. She stepped back, suddenly needing distance, needing air. Elias didn't look at her, but something in his manner changed. as though her reaction had reached him. He moved closer to the stallion. The animal lowered its head, finally allowing Elias to brush his hand along its neck. Margaret felt a rush of awe. The horse that had rejected every handler for months now stood quietly beneath Elias's touch. He worked slowly, adjusting the rope, guiding the horse gently. Step by step, he gained more ground. Margaret's breath caught each time the stallion shifted, but Elias's calm never wavered. At last, after several long minutes, he turned to her. "I can train him, but it'll take time, and I'll need full responsibility. No one else working with him, no one interfering." Margaret blinked. "Full responsibility?" "Yes. If I'm going to do this right, he has to trust only one person at first. After he learns calm and confidence, others can help. But not before." She hesitated. "That is a great deal of authority." "I know. And you've only been here one morning." "I know that too." She folded her arms. "Why should I trust you with the most valuable horse on the ranch?" He didn't offer charm. He didn't offer flattery. He simply answered with plain, unwavering conviction, "Because if you don't, he'll stay broken, and so will this ranch." The words landed between them like a declaration. She felt them more deeply than she wanted. "And what if you're wrong?" she whispered. "Then I'll take the blame," he said quietly. "Not you." Her throat tightened. No one had offered to share her burdens since her father died. The idea felt dangerous, like leaning too far over a ledge. Elias stepped closer, not near enough to intrude, but enough that she felt the steadiness radiating from him. "Margaret," he said gently, "let me help him." She searched his face for arrogance, deception, recklessness. She found none. Only patience, only certainty. She opened her mouth, still undecided, but before she could answer, footsteps echoed at the stable entrance. A woman stood there, a stranger, dressed in travel-worn clothes, her face pale with surprise. Her eyes locked onto Elias, and she whispered a name Margaret had never heard before. "Calder?" The sound of that name hung in the air like a sudden chill. Calder. Margaret stared at the woman, then at Elias, waiting for him to deny it, correct her, laugh even. But he did none of those things. His shoulders tightened the slightest bit, barely noticeable unless one had been watching him as closely as Margaret had these last days. The woman stepped forward. "Calder, it is you, isn't it?" Elias drew a long breath, steady but reluctant. "Mum, you must be mistaken." "I'm not," she insisted, eyes bright with recognition. "I saw you in Abilene years ago. You worked at the Silver Ridge stables. You handled the horses there better than any man I'd seen. And you went by Calder then." Margaret felt something sharp twist inside her. She didn't know whether it was resentment, fear, or simple disbelief. She stepped forward. "Who are you exactly?" The woman blinked, then straightened. "Forgive me. My name is Clara Watkins. I'm passing through on business. When I heard this ranch had a new horse trainer, I thought the name sounded familiar. But seeing him now, I'm certain." Elias did not move. He didn't deny it again, but neither did he explain. The tension in him was too controlled, too measured. Margaret had seen the same restraint in the stallion moments earlier. Clara looked between them. "I didn't mean to intrude. I only wanted to say hello." She paused, confusion touching her voice. "You're not using that name anymore," Elias finally spoke. "No, I'm not." Silence fell, heavy and uneasy. Clara nodded slowly. "Well, it was good to see you. I'll be on my way." She excused herself with a polite tilt of her head and stepped out of the stables, leaving a lingering cloud of questions behind her. The moment she disappeared into the sunlight, Margaret turned toward Elias. "Calder?" she asked quietly. Elias exhaled. "It was a name I used once." "That is not an answer." He rubbed the back of his neck, the closest thing to discomfort she had seen from him. "It's complicated." Margaret stiffened. "You assured me you came here to start anew. But I cannot build a life with someone who hides something this significant. I'm not hiding something dangerous. That," she said sharply, "is not yours to determine." He flinched slightly, but his voice remained calm. "Margaret, give me time. Let me explain properly." She stared at him, wounded pride twisting through her ribs. "Time," she repeated. "You ask for trust you have not earned." Yes, he admitted, because I'm trying to earn it now. The honesty startled her, disarmed her even, but she would not let it soften her. Not yet. She turned abruptly. We will discuss this later. There is work to do. Without waiting for a reply, she left the stables. Elias did not follow. For hours, Margaret threw herself into tasks she had neglected, reviewing accounts, sorting repair requests, directing the ranch hands. But frustration followed her like a shadow. Each time she tried to focus, the name resurfaced. Calder. Who was he before he became Elias Carter? What had he been running from? Why had he come here to her with half-truths? When the sun dipped low, she stood alone on the porch, arms folded tightly across her chest. The breeze was warm, but she felt none of it. Footsteps approached from behind. She didn't need to turn to know it was him. I didn't come to argue, Elias said softly, only to ask if I may speak with you. She closed her eyes briefly, gathering whatever strength she had left. Say what you must. He stepped beside her but left enough space that she could choose to walk away if she wished. She didn't. Miss Watkins recognizing me. It wasn't something I wanted, but it wasn't dangerous either. Margaret faced him at last. Then tell me the truth. Why were you called Calder? He met her gaze with steady resignation. It was my mother's maiden name. When I left home to find work, I used it so no one would question who I belonged to. Why hide who you belong to? Because, he said quietly, I had no one to belong to. The answer shocked her more than any scandalized confession might have. She searched his expression, expecting hardness or bitterness, but his face held only tired honesty. I used the name Calder in every town where I worked odd jobs, he continued. Blacksmithing, stable work, ranch labor. I changed it to Carter when I left that life behind. Why change it? He hesitated, because I wanted to stop being the man people thought they knew. Margaret crossed her arms again, though less defensively now. And what sort of man did they think you were? One with no prospects, no respect, no future. His voice dropped, and I was tired of starting every introduction with an apology. Margaret said nothing for a long moment. The sincerity in him, unpolished, unembellished, made her feel almost foolish for having imagined something scandalous. Still, the wound inside her throbbed. You should have told me. I know, he whispered. I should have, but I feared it would make you think less of me. And you already had reasons to. She blinked, startled. Why would you think that? He gave a small, humorless smile. Because I saw it in your eyes the moment I stepped off that coach. Margaret looked away, guilt tightening in her chest. You surprised me. That is all. It's enough, he said quietly. Surprise alone is enough to turn a person cautious. They stood in silence, watching dusk settle over the land. Finally she spoke. I should have asked about your past earlier. I assumed I knew who you were. He shook his head. No. You assumed who you wanted me to be, and that's not your fault. People do it all the time. His voice wasn't accusing. It was gentle, too gentle, given the storm she'd brought upon him. She took a careful step closer. Elias, or Calder, whichever name you prefer. I prefer Elias, he said. It's who I'm choosing to become. Margaret nodded slowly. Very well. Elias, then. She met his eyes, steadying her breath. If there truly is nothing dangerous in your past, nothing that could bring harm to this ranch, then I will accept your explanation. He bowed his head. Thank you. But do not mistake that for complete trust, she added, her voice firm. That must be earned. He lifted his gaze. I intend to earn it, every day if I must. Something warm flickered inside her. She pushed it down before it could grow. They stood there a moment longer, the last traces of sunlight dissolving behind the hills. A quiet understanding settled between them, but it was fragile like thin ice beneath cautious feet. Margaret turned toward the door. Tomorrow we begin repairs on the western fence. I expect your help. You'll have it, he said, at first light. And the stallion. I'll continue working with him, Elias replied. He's close to accepting the halter. He only needs steadiness. Margaret nodded. Good. She started to walk inside, but paused on the threshold. Elias? Yes? You said earlier that you wanted to explain properly. Does that mean there is more to tell? He hesitated. His jaw tightened in a way she had not seen before. There is more, he admitted. But not all at once. Why not? Because, he said gently, I'm not sure you're ready to hear it. Her heart skipped uneasily. Is it about your family? Your past work? No, he said quietly. It is about the reason I left my last position, and why I came so far from it. Her breath stilled. Elias, what happened? He looked at her, eyes shadowed by a truth he had carried too long. Margaret, I haven't told you everything about my past. Margaret stood very still, her hand resting lightly on the doorframe. Elias's voice carried a weight she had not heard from him before, something deeper than caution, something like regret. She drew in a slow breath and stepped back onto the porch, signaling him to continue. All right, she said. Tell me. Elias looked out over the pasture, as though searching the dusk for the right words. I left my last position because I disagreed with the way the horses were treated. Not in a small way. In a way that made it impossible to stay. Margaret narrowed her gaze. Disagreed how? He hesitated. The stablemaster believed in breaking horses quickly, forcefully. He insisted it was the only method that produced results. I disagreed. I spoke against him often. Too often, perhaps. That doesn't sound like something you should hide. It wasn't the disagreement alone, he said quietly. It was what followed. She waited. Elias folded his arms, his posture still but tense. One afternoon, a young colt panicked during training. They pushed him too hard. He reared in fear, not aggression. The stablemaster blamed me, although I wasn't the one handling the colt at the time. Margaret exhaled, relief mixed with something sharper. So he dismissed you? Yes, Elias replied, but not before making sure others would hesitate to hire me. He said I was troublesome, too soft with animals, too outspoken with employers. That is hardly a crime. No. But it was enough to stain my name. And in certain circles, a stained name closes doors very quickly. Margaret looked at him more closely. And this is the reason you changed your name? One reason, he admitted. When people heard the name Calder, they heard trouble. So I left the state, chose the name Carter, and hoped to start over somewhere quiet, where no one knew me and no one expected anything except honest work. Margaret's chest softened with something like sympathy, but pride held her steady. You should have told me sooner. He nodded once. You're right. Silence expanded between them, not harsh but thoughtful. Margaret tried to sort her emotions, yet they tangled too quickly. Disappointment, relief, gratitude, wariness, all layered so closely she could not name them. She stepped away from the door, pacing slowly. I don't appreciate secrets. I know, Elias said quietly, and I don't like surprises. I saw that, he answered, a faint, rueful warmth in his voice. She stopped pacing and looked directly at him. But I appreciate honesty, even when it comes late. He bowed his head in acknowledgement. I'll remember that. Margaret crossed her arms again, though not defensively this time. Very well. If that's all, then we can move on. Elias opened his mouth as though to speak, then closed it again. Something unsaid lingered in his expression. What? She asked. There's one more part of it, he said slowly. But it isn't something you need to worry about. Her eyes narrowed. Elias Carter, if you end another sentence by telling me what I do or do not need to worry about, I will stop listening altogether. His lips twitched, not quite a smile, but close. Fair enough. Tell me, she insisted. The whole truth. He drew a deeper breath. When I left that job, the stablemaster sent word ahead to several ranching families, telling them I was unreliable, that I walked away from commitments. That isn't true, she said instantly. He tilted his head. You believe that? I have eyes, she replied. I've watched you work. You're steady in ways most men never achieve. Elias blinked once, surprised by the firmness in her voice. Margaret ignored the slight warmth rising in her own cheeks. He lowered his voice. The problem is, I don't know how far his letters traveled, and I don't know who believes them. It's possible someone here might have heard the rumors already. Margaret stiffened. Even in Texas, word travels faster than you think. She exhaled slowly. So you feared your past would reach me before you could explain? Yes, he said. That's the truth. It was a simple truth, a human truth. Not dangerous, not shameful, not disqualifying. Margaret finally relaxed her shoulders. I understand. Elias studied her face with a caution she had not noticed before. You do? Yes, she said. It isn't a crime to defend what you believe is right. He let out a soft breath, the smallest sign of relief. Margaret straightened. And if anyone here wishes to bring old rumors to my door, they may speak to me directly. Elias's eyes warmed. I'm grateful. She looked away quickly, before that warmth stirred something deeper in her. We'll manage, she said. You and I. The ranch, too. Yes, he agreed, we will. Their shared quiet stretched into something peaceful, but that peace was short-lived. At dinner, the atmosphere felt different. Mrs. Weaver served stew and biscuits with her usual brisk efficiency, but she kept glancing at Elias with puzzled curiosity. Margaret sensed it. Word had already reached the household. Clara Watkins's certainty, the name she'd spoken aloud, had not gone unnoticed. Mrs. Weaver finally said, Miss Margaret, that visitor earlier seemed surprised to see Mr. Carter. Margaret set her spoon down carefully. Miss Watkins knew him from another town. Mrs. Weaver nodded slowly. I see. Elias ate quietly, not defensive but not eager to enter the discussion either. After supper, Margaret returned to her office, where ledgers waited in tidy, accusatory stacks. She opened the newest account book and frowned at the numbers. Feed was still low, repairs expensive, income thin. Her father's voice echoed faintly in her memory. A ranch doesn't fail in a day, Margaret. It fails when you stop fighting for it. She tapped the ledger with frustration. I haven't stopped fighting. A soft knock drew her attention. Elias stood at the doorway. May I assist? He asked. With the accounts, I doubt you'd enjoy it. He smiled a little. I didn't mean the numbers. I meant the burden. She froze at the gentle honesty in his tone. I can help lighten it, he said, if you'd let me. I don't know if I should, she whispered. Then let me prove that you can. She looked at him fully for the first time that day. His sincerity disarmed her more effectively than any charm could have. She closed the ledger. Walk with me, she said. They stepped outside. Moonlight washed the yard in pale silver. The ranch was quiet. Only the sound of crickets filled the night. Margaret walked slowly, hands clasped behind her back. Elias, this ranch is fragile. The horses, the cattle, the finances. Everything. I know. And I've worked very hard to keep it standing since my father passed. I can see that. You don't know, she said softly. Not fully. I've faced neighbors who want my land, bankers who want my signature, workers who doubt me. And now, she hesitated. And now you have me, he said. She breathed shakily. Yes. Elias stopped walking. She stopped too. You don't have to trust me completely yet, he said. Only enough to let me help. Her chest tightened. I want to, but it would require me to set aside pride I've carried for years. He studied her with quiet understanding. Pride doesn't keep a ranch alive, people do. Margaret closed her eyes for a brief moment. When she opened them, the decision sat clearly in her heart. Then we work as partners, she said. Not master and hired hand. Not future husband and bride. But partners. Elias nodded. Partners. They stood silently, the night folding around them. Finally she turned to head back inside, but froze. A shadowy figure approached from the road. Not threatening, not rushing, just walking with uncertain steps, carrying something in their hand. Margaret tensed. Someone's coming. Elias stepped slightly ahead of her, not protectively, but instinctively aware. The figure drew closer. Margaret recognized the silhouette. Clara Watkins. She held a small envelope, and her expression was grave. Margaret, Elias murmured, stay behind me. She shook her head. No. I'll face her. Clara reached them, breathless from haste. I'm sorry to return so late, but after I left I remembered something important. Margaret's heart tightened. What is it? Clara extended the envelope with a trembling hand. This letter arrived in Abilene for him months ago, she said. It was forwarded from his old stable. No one claimed it. I thought perhaps he should finally see it. Margaret looked at Elias, his face drained of color. Clara added softly, the sender insisted it was urgent. Elias did not reach for the envelope. He simply stared at it. Margaret felt a chill run down her spine. What is it? She whispered. Elias swallowed hard, his voice barely audible. That handwriting, I know it. Elias did not take the envelope at first. His eyes stayed fixed on the handwriting, as if it were something fragile, something that might break if he touched it too quickly. Margaret watched him carefully, her heartbeat rising with a mixture of fear and something she did not want to name. Clara shifted nervously. "If you'd rather I leave it inside the house, I can." "No," Elias said quietly. "Thank you. I'll take it." He reached for the envelope with a steady hand, though Margaret could see a faint tremor in his fingers. Clara gave a final nod, wished them a gentle good evening, and walked back down the road, disappearing into the night. Margaret waited until the shadows swallowed Clara's silhouette before speaking. "Who sent it?" Elias did not answer. He simply stared at the sealed flap as though the past itself sat trapped beneath the paper. "Elias," she said softly, "what does it mean?" He turned the envelope over once, then again, his throat tightening. Finally, he whispered, "It's from someone who used to trust me." Margaret felt the words settle in her chest. "A friend?" "No," he said, "not exactly. Someone who depended on me. Someone I disappointed." She stepped closer. "You don't have to read it now." He looked at her with something haunted in his eyes. "I do." With slow hands, he opened the envelope and pulled out the single folded page. Moonlight wasn't bright enough to read by, so Margaret gestured toward the porch lantern. "Come inside." Elias nodded, following her to the porch, where the warm glow of the lantern cast a soft circle of light. He unfolded the letter, held it at an angle, and read in silence. Margaret watched his expression shift, first recognition, then tension, then something like sorrow. She waited, resisting the urge to lean in and read over his shoulder. After a long moment, Elias exhaled shakily and folded the letter again. "It's from Mr. Grayson, the owner of the Silver Ridge stables." Margaret frowned. "The man who dismissed you?" "Yes." "What does he want?" Elias hesitated. "He's asking for help." "Help?" She stepped closer, confused. "I thought you said he didn't respect you." "He didn't," Elias murmured. "Not then. But he respects my way with horses, even if he'd never admit it aloud." "Then why ask now?" Elias looked at her, his voice tight. "One of his horses has fallen ill, not from mistreatment, just from age and exhaustion. It was the best horse he ever owned, the one he trusted above all others. He says he's tried every remedy he knows. He's asking if I can return, just to look at the animal, to give my opinion, to bring peace if nothing else." Margaret's breath caught. "He wants you to go back?" "Yes, that's bold of him." A faint, humorless smile touched Elias's lips. "Mr. Grayson has always been bold." Margaret leaned against the porch rail, absorbing the information. "Do you want to go?" Elias dropped his gaze. "I'm not sure. What's stopping you?" He took a long breath before answering. "I left that place feeling small, useless, like a man whose opinions didn't matter. Going back would mean facing all the people who believed I wasn't worth keeping." Margaret felt a pang she couldn't quite explain. "You aren't that man anymore." "I know," he said softly, "but they don't." Silence settled between them. Crickets chirped in the distance. The lantern flickered softly, casting shifting patterns across Elias's face. Margaret cleared her throat. "Then tell me something. If this letter hadn't been delivered, would you have wanted to leave?" "No," he said instantly. The firmness in his answer startled them both. Elias continued, quieter now. "I came here because I wanted to start over. And since arriving, I've found work worth doing again, horses worth saving, and a ranch that needs steady hands." Margaret swallowed. "You mean my ranch?" "Yes. And that is enough for you?" He lifted his gaze to hers, steady and calm. "It is." Her breath caught. She stepped away before she could let that warmth settle too deeply inside her. Elias folded the letter carefully. "I'll respond to him. Tell him I'll consider going, but only if the timing allows it. We have plenty to do here." Margaret blinked. "You would go alone?" "Yes. If I go at all." The thought unsettled her more than it should have. She straightened her posture. "If you leave even temporarily, it will cause more gossip." "I know. And the ranch will suffer without your help." "I know that too." She hesitated before asking the question that had lodged in her heart. "Would you come back?" Elias met her eyes, no hesitation in his expression. "If I leave, I'll return. You have my word." The simple promise steadied her more than she expected, but she would not show it. "Very well," she said quietly. Just don't make any decisions tonight. Think first. He nodded. I will. She stepped toward the door. I should get some rest. Elias remained on the porch. Margaret, he said softly. She paused without turning. Yes? You haven't asked what the rest of the letter said. She stood very still. Because I assumed you would tell me if it mattered. He hesitated. It might. She finally turned back toward him. Then tell me. Elias took another breath, searching her face as if deciding how much truth she could bear. Mr. Grayson wrote something else. Something I didn't mention. What was it? Elias unfolded the page again, his voice low. He said the horse, the one he wants me to see, has been refusing every handler, and that the only time the horse calmed was when he heard someone mention my name. Margaret felt the ache of that. Then the animal needs you. Yes, but he also warned me that returning might bring questions. Some people there believe I walked out too quickly. Others think I was wrong to challenge the stable master. They may not welcome me. Margaret straightened. Then you must decide what matters more, their opinions or what you can do for that horse. Elias looked at her with quiet admiration. Your father would have said something just like that. She swallowed lightly. He believed courage meant showing up when it mattered, even when it hurt. Elias nodded slowly. Your father was right. The porch fell quiet again. Margaret stepped toward the door once more, but before she entered, she glanced back. Elias? Yes? Whatever choice you make it as the man you are now, not the man they believe you to be. His eyes softened. I'll try. She offered a small, brief nod and went inside. The house felt too still, too thoughtful. She climbed the stairs, changed into her nightdress, but sleep did not come quickly. Her mind spun with Elias's past, his fears, his talent, his sincerity, and the strange tug she tried so hard to ignore. It was well after midnight when she finally drifted into a light, uneasy sleep. Morning came early. Margaret descended the stairs to find Mrs. Weaver bustling in the kitchen. The smell of cornbread filled the air. Morning, Margaret said. Morning, dear. Mr. Carter's been out for hours already. Took the stallion out for a walking exercise, if you can believe it. Margaret froze. He took him out of the stall? Yes. Calm as a spring breeze. That man knows horses, I tell you. Margaret stepped toward the back door, her heart quickening despite herself. She crossed the yard and found Elias leading the stallion in slow circles. The horse moved with hesitant trust, muscles still tense but no longer trembling. Elias looked up as she approached. Good morning. You're walking him, she said, surprised. He let me put on the halter, only after a long while. He's still unsure, but he's trying. Margaret watched the animal step carefully, matching Elias's pace as if drawn by invisible thread. It's remarkable, she murmured. It's patience, he replied simply. She stepped closer. And will you still consider returning to Abilene? Yes, he admitted. But I want a few more days here first. This one still needs guidance. Margaret nodded slowly. I'm glad you waited. She looked at the horse again, then at Elias. She wanted to say more. Something honest, something she wasn't ready to name. But before she could speak, a ranch hand came rushing from the main gate. Miss Margaret, he shouted, a telegram just arrived. She turned sharply. For whom? For Mr. Carter. Margaret's stomach tightened. Elias stopped walking. The ranch hand handed him the sealed slip of paper. Elias took it, brows tightening as he broke the seal. Margaret watched his eyes scan the message. Color drained from his face. He folded the telegram slowly, then lifted his gaze to hers. Margaret, he said quietly, I think you need to hear what this says. Elias held the telegram with both hands, as if it were something fragile that might crumble if he breathed too hard. Margaret waited, resisting the urge to reach for it herself. The ranch hand lingered only a moment before retreating, sensing the tension that had settled over the yard. Finally, Elias spoke. It's from Mr. Grayson again, but it isn't about the horse this time. Margaret felt her pulse jump. Then what is it about? Elias lowered the paper slightly, revealing the strain in his expression. He wants to see me, immediately. He says the situation has become urgent, and he can't explain everything through telegram. She frowned. But he already asked for your help in the letter. What more could he possibly need? Elias didn't answer at once. He refolded the slip of paper, slipping it into his pocket with slow, deliberate movements. I'm not sure, but whatever it is, he believes it can't wait. Margaret watched him closely. He's not trying to lure you back under false pretenses, is he? Elias shook his head. Mr. Grayson isn't the type to hide intentions. He might be stubborn, but he's never been deceitful. She crossed her arms, not fully convinced. And what does this urgency mean for us, for the ranch? He looked at her then, truly looked, and the weight in his gaze told her he'd already wrestled with that question. It means I need to go. Her breath caught. Go? As in today? Soon, he admitted. Maybe within the next day or two. Margaret steadied her voice. Elias, we have work here. The western fence needs repair, the mare is due to foal in a few weeks, and the stallion... He stepped closer. I know. And I wouldn't leave if it weren't important. Her throat tightened. She looked down at the stallion, who nudged Elias's shoulder, as if sensing the shift in mood. Elias stroked the horse's neck gently. I wouldn't go if I didn't think it necessary, he said softly. Margaret's mind raced, trying to grasp the implications. She wanted to appear calm, composed, untouched by the news, but the truth settled like a stone in her chest. She didn't want him to leave. Not when the ranch depended on him. Not when the horses trusted him. Not when she was only beginning to trust him herself. She lifted her chin. Is he asking you to return for good? No, Elias said. Only to assist him through whatever this urgency is. And after that, I'll return here. Her voice softened unwillingly. You're certain? Margaret, he said, and the way he spoke her name made her pulse hitch. I gave you my word. I intend to keep it. She turned away, embarrassed by the relief spreading through her. Then at least wait a day or two, she said. Finish what you can here. Prepare the hands for your absence. I will, he promised. They walked the stallion back into his stall, working in practiced silence. Elias unhooked the halter with gentle hands, his movement steady even as tension clung to him. Margaret lingered by the stall door. Do you think this urgency has anything to do with you personally? Elias paused. I don't know. If it does, she said carefully, I want to be aware of it. I want the truth. He nodded. I'll tell you everything I learn. She searched his face for hesitation, but found none. Good. When they stepped out of the stable, a pair of ranch hands hurried by with a pile of lumber for the fence repairs. Margaret called out assignments, directing them with the practiced authority she'd grown into over the past months. Elias observed quietly, the hint of a smile in his eyes as though admiring her composure. When the workers dispersed, he approached her again. You manage them well, she shrugged. I manage because I must. You manage because you're capable, he corrected. There's a difference. Margaret didn't know how to respond. Praise unsettled her more than criticism. I'll start on the fence repairs, Elias said. I can finish most of the work today. Most, she echoed. He nodded. Won't leave anything halfway. She hesitated, then added, and you'll keep me informed. Every step. He gathered tools and set off toward the western boundary. She watched him for a long moment before turning back toward the house. The day stretched into a blur of tasks. Margaret prepared supply lists, balanced the accounts, and organized the barns. She couldn't stop glancing toward the fields where Elias worked. Every sight of him, shirt sleeves rolled, shoulders bent in focused effort, sent a strange tension through her. Late afternoon winds brushed dust over the pastures. Margaret brought a pitcher of water to the fence line, pretending it was merely courtesy. Elias accepted the drink with a grateful nod. Thank you. Are you nearly done? Another hour or two, he said. Then the section will hold through the season. Margaret looked at the repaired posts, straight, secure, sturdy. I work faster than 3 ranch hands combined. He chuckled lightly. Only when the work demands it. She hesitated before asking, Are you worried about what you'll find in Abilene? A shadow crossed his features. A little. What worries you? That I might have waited too long to return, he admitted. That the horse, the one who trusted me, might be suffering. And what about Mr. Grayson? Elias's jaw tightened. I don't fear him, but he knows things about me. Not dangerous things, but personal. Things I would prefer not to relive. Margaret felt a sudden urge to shield him from that past. The impulse surprised her. Whatever he knows, she said. Whatever you fear facing, remember something. What's that? You're not the same man you were then. Something warm flickered in his eyes. No, I'm not, she swallowed. Good. They stood quietly for a moment, shadows growing long across the field. As dusk neared, the temperature cooled. The ranch hands headed to supper, tipping their hats to Margaret as they passed. Elias wiped his hands on a cloth, preparing to wrap up the day's work. "Margaret," he said softly. She turned. "Yes? There's something else I didn't mention about the letter." Her chest tightened. "You said you told me everything." "I told you all that concerned me," he clarified. "But Grayson wrote something about you too." Surprise flared in her. "About me?" Elias nodded. "He said the Hollister Ranch was once respected across counties, that your father's word was law, and his horses were unmatched." Margaret's breath shook faintly. "I know that. There's more," Elias continued. "He wrote that the man who marries into this ranch will have a responsibility greater than land. He'll have to protect your reputation, your standing, and your future." Margaret blinked, stunned. "Why would he write that?" "Because he assumed," Elias said slowly, "that I was already your husband or close to becoming one." Margaret's breath caught. "But he doesn't know our arrangement." "No. But he wrote that should I assist him now, he'd be willing to repay the favor in a way that secures a better place for both of us." She felt heat rise to her cheeks. "That is presumptuous of him." "Yes," Elias agreed. "But he meant well." She looked away, heart thrumming beneath her ribs. "Then it seems he expects your involvement here to be long-term." Elias's eyes lingered on her face. "He's assuming something that has not yet been decided." Margaret fought the pull of his gaze. "Yes, well, assumptions often lead people astray." Elias lowered his voice. "Do they?" She drew a breath, steadying herself. "Elias, this arrangement, our engagement, was born of necessity. But what the future holds, that depends on much more than a contract." His expression softened, earnest and steady. "I know." She stepped back before her thoughts could tangle further. "You should finish the fence before nightfall. We'll talk again after supper." Elias nodded, though a faint sadness moved through his eyes. "As you wish." She turned toward the house, but his voice stopped her. "Margaret." She paused, looking back. He held her gaze with quiet sincerity. "I will return." Her chest tightened, but she kept her voice calm. "You'd better." She headed back to the house, her steps measured, her heart anything but. The sun slipped beneath the horizon by the time supper concluded. Margaret barely tasted her meal. She excused herself early, claiming exhaustion, though her mind churned far too loudly for rest. She stepped out onto the porch, hoping the night breeze might settle her thoughts. Lanterns flickered in the windows. Crickets hummed in the grass. A quiet peace settled over the ranch. Then she saw him. Elias approached the house from the stables, walking with slow, deliberate steps. The lantern's glow brushed across his features, tired, thoughtful, carrying the weight of decisions not yet made. He stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. "Margaret," he said. She held her breath, waiting. "I've made my decision." Her pulse stilled. "And?" He looked up at her with a mixture of resolve and something deeper, something she wasn't ready to name. "I'm leaving at dawn." The word struck her harder than she expected. She swallowed. "I see. But that's not all," he added quietly. Margaret's voice trembled despite her efforts. "What else?" Elias stepped closer, moonlight catching the depth of his expression. "There's something I didn't tell you about Mr. Grayson's telegram." Her breath hitched. "What didn't you tell me?" He hesitated, only a heartbeat. "Margaret, he wrote that someone else asked him to contact me. Someone who specifically insisted I be found." Margaret gripped the porch railing. The night around them seemed to tighten. "Someone insisted on finding you," she repeated. "Who?" Elias drew in a slow breath. "He didn't write the name. He only said the person refused to speak through telegram and demanded I return as soon as possible." Margaret felt an unwelcome flutter of fear. "Do you have any idea who it could be?" "I have guesses," he admitted. "None of them simple." She stepped down one stair, closer without meaning to. "Is it someone from your past work?" "Possibly," he said, "but not from the stable. Someone else, someone I'd rather not face unless I must." He didn't elaborate, and she sensed he wouldn't. "Not tonight." Margaret steadied her voice. "So that is why you must leave at dawn." "It's one reason," Elias replied. "The other is the horse. I can't ignore an animal in need. Not after everything Mr. Grayson wrote. Margaret nodded tightly. She understood that part. It was the unknown caller that unsettled her. They stood in silence for a moment, the night breeze brushing gently between them. Margaret glanced toward the stable, where the stallion had finally grown used to Elias's presence. It would be days before he allowed another handler near him. "You'll write as soon as you arrive?" she asked softly. "Yes." "And you'll return after?" "Yes." Something deep inside her ached at the quiet certainty in his tone. Elias stepped one pace closer, lowering his voice. "Margaret, I don't want you to worry." She let out a faint laugh, a small, breathless sound. "You asking me not to worry is like asking the sun not to rise." He smiled slightly. "Then I won't ask. I'll just do my part." "And your part," she said, "is to come back safely." "It is," he said. "You have my word." Margaret turned away before her expression could betray the warmth those words stirred. "You should rest. Dawn comes early." "I will," he said. "Good night, Margaret. Good night, Elias." She went inside, closing the door gently behind her. But long after the latch clicked, she remained standing in the dim hallway, pressing a hand to her chest, as if she could steady the wild rhythm there. She slept poorly. Each time she drifted off, she dreamed of hoofbeats growing faint, as though Elias were riding farther and farther away. When she woke, the sky was still dark. A faint light traced the horizon. She dressed quickly and hurried outside, the morning cool against her skin. Elias stood near the barn, saddling a chestnut gelding. Mrs. Weaver handed him a small parcel of food wrapped in cloth. The ranch hands nodded respectfully as they passed, offering quiet goodbyes. Word had spread. Everyone knew he was leaving for a few days. Margaret approached slowly, trying not to appear as though she'd rushed. "You're ready," she said. He fastened the last strap. "Almost." He turned toward her then, hat in hand. Dawn cast a pale glow over his features, making him look older, steadier, almost solemn. "I'll be back as soon as I can," he said. She nodded. "I know. If the stallion regresses without me—" "He won't," she said firmly. "You've given him a foundation. I'll keep the ranch quiet. And the fence—" "Already handled." He hesitated. "And the accounts—" "I've managed those for months," she said. "I'll manage them for a few days more." The faintest warmth touched his expression. "You always do." Margaret clasped her hands behind her back to hide their trembling. "Well, you should go." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Margaret, I want you to know something before I leave." Her breath caught. "What is it?" He searched her face with a depth that made her feel as though the world narrowed to the space between them. "I wouldn't walk away from this place if it weren't necessary. You've given me a purpose again. Something worth coming back to." The words hit her harder than she expected. She swallowed, but her voice came out soft and unsteady. "Then I'll trust that you will." "I will," he said. For a brief moment, neither of them moved. The air held a fragile tension, something unnamed, something dangerous in its gentleness. Finally, Elias mounted the horse. He took the reins, looked down at her, and offered one last reassuring nod. She stepped back, allowing him space to ride out. But before he urged the horse forward, he paused again. "Margaret." "Yes?" "If anything happens here, anything at all, you send a message to Abilene, directly to the Silver Ridge stables." "Nothing will happen," she said quickly, too quickly. "I mean it," he insisted. "I want to know if you need help." She held his gaze. "I will." He studied her one last time, as though memorizing her. Then he guided the horse toward the gate. The ranch hands opened it for him. The horse trotted forward, and the sound of hooves stirred a hollow ache inside her chest. Elias rode down the road, his silhouette shrinking against the rising light until he disappeared over the distant ridge. Margaret stood there for a long moment, arms wrapped loosely around herself. She didn't realize Mrs. Weaver had joined her until the housekeeper spoke. "He'll be back, Miss Margaret." "I know," Margaret whispered. "I just wish he didn't have to go." Mrs. Weaver studied her with a knowing look. "You care for him, anyone can see it." Margaret stiffened. "I do not. We are merely partners," Mrs. Weaver finished. "Yes, but hearts don't know such words." Margaret looked away, unwilling to argue or agree. She spent the rest of the morning burying herself in work. She checked the foaling mare, inspected the repaired fence, oversaw the feed wagons, anything to keep her thoughts from drifting down the road Elias had taken. But each hour only sharpened the quiet ache. By noon, exhaustion forced her to pause. She leaned against the stable door, breathing slowly. The stallion watched her from inside his stall, ears flicking. "You miss him too," she murmured. The horse snorted softly, nudging the door. She reached out, brushing her fingers lightly across his cheek. "He'll come back." The stallion blinked slowly, as if accepting her word. Margaret stepped back, straightened her posture, and forced herself to return to her duties. Evening approached. Margaret gathered the ranch hands to organize tasks for the next day. She spoke with calm authority, though inside she felt hollow and restless. When the meeting ended, she closed her ledger and stepped outside. The sky glowed with the last traces of daylight. She exhaled slowly, finally allowing herself a moment of stillness. Then she heard the sound of fast footsteps approaching. The ranch hand who'd delivered the telegram earlier ran toward her again, breathless, eyes wide with urgency. "Miss Margaret," she turned sharply. "What is it?" He held out a small envelope, crumpled, dusty, clearly carried in a hurry. "Another message, delivered by a rider from town. He said it's urgent." Margaret felt her stomach twist. "For me, for you," he confirmed. She took the envelope, fingers trembling before she even realized it. Breaking the seal, she unfolded the brief note inside. Her breath caught as she read the single chilling line. "Margaret, the person who insisted on finding him is coming your way." Margaret reread the message, her heartbeat tightening with every word. The ranch hand hovered nearby, uncertain whether to wait or flee the tension settling over her. "Who delivered this?" she asked. "A rider from town," he said. "Said he didn't know the sender, only that the message needed to reach you before evening." Margaret folded the paper. "Thank you. You may return to your duties." He nodded and hurried off. She remained frozen for a long moment, staring at the quiet fields stretching beyond the house. The sun dipped low, washing everything in a faint copper glow. Normally, that light brought her comfort. Today it only deepened her unease. Someone was coming, someone connected to Elias's past, but Mr. Grayson's message had insisted the person wasn't a threat, only determined. Someone who wanted to find Elias, not harm him. Margaret reminded herself of that again and again, as though steady repetition could untangle the knot in her chest. She took a slow breath and walked back toward the porch. Mrs. Weaver met her at the steps. "Another message?" the housekeeper asked, reading Margaret's expression instantly. "Yes," Margaret whispered. "Is it bad news?" "Not bad," Margaret said. "Just unexpected." Mrs. Weaver studied her with concern. Would you like help preparing supper early? Something calming?" Margaret shook her head. "Thank you, but I should handle this on my own." Mrs. Weaver nodded, though her worry lingered. "If you need company, you call for me." "I will." Margaret stepped inside and placed the note on her desk. The room felt strangely smaller than usual, the walls holding secrets in their shadows. She lit a lamp, sat in her chair, and tried to collect her thoughts. It had been only hours since Elias left, and already the air around the ranch felt different, emptier. She had grown used to hearing his steady footsteps at dawn, his calm voice near the stables, the gentle way he spoke to the horses. The ranch had learned to depend on him almost as quickly as she had. Margaret glanced at the message again. "The person who insisted on finding him is coming your way." She read it 3 times, searching for hidden meaning. There was none. Only truth. Whoever the person was, they would arrive soon, perhaps within hours. She straightened in her chair. This ranch had faced gossip, financial strain, and neglect. It would not bend under the arrival of a stranger, not while she had breath to defend it. She rose and went outside, scanning the distant road where Elias had ridden earlier. The horizon was thinning into soft twilight. The faint crescent moon had begun to rise. She waited. Minutes passed. Then footsteps approached from the barn. One of the ranch hands, Thomas, tall and mild, walked toward her and removed his hat. "Miss Margaret," he said, "we saw someone riding toward the ranch from the east, a woman, traveling alone." Margaret's heart lurched. "Did she stop at the gate?" "Not yet, ma'am, but she slowed when she saw the fence line. Looks like she's gathering her bearings." "And she's alone?" "Yes, ma'am." Margaret exhaled slowly. "Thank you, Thomas. I'll greet her myself." Thomas hesitated. Would you like me nearby? No, she said softly. This is something I must handle. He nodded. All right, ma'am. Margaret stepped away from the porch and walked toward the front gate, her skirt brushing the dust as she moved. The dusk air cooled against her cheeks. Every step steadied her heartbeat until she felt almost calm. The approaching rider slowed even further, then halted. The woman dismounted with practiced ease. She was older than Margaret had expected, perhaps in her late 40s, with streaks of silver running through her dark hair and a sharp, observant gaze. Margaret lifted her chin. Good evening. I am Margaret Hollister, owner of this ranch. How may I assist you? The woman removed her gloves, folding them carefully. Miss Hollister, I apologize for arriving unannounced. My name is Hazel Grayson. Margaret blinked. Grayson? Yes, the woman said with a faint smile. Mr. Grayson is my brother. Margaret felt her breath catch. Then you must be the one who insisted he send for Elias. Hazel nodded. I am. Attention Margaret hadn't realized she'd been holding eased slightly. This was no stranger with ill intentions, no hidden threat, only a relative of the man who'd written Elias. I see, Margaret said gently. Mr. Carter left this morning. He's on his way to Abilene. Hazel let out a soft exhale, part relief, part exhaustion. Then at least I was not too late. You came a long way just to find him, Margaret said. Yes, Hazel answered. I did. Margaret gestured toward the house. Would you like water? A place to rest? Hazel nodded gratefully. A drink would be appreciated. They walked toward the porch together. Hazel moved with calm, deliberate steps. Margaret felt her initial unease fade with each moment spent beside her. Inside, Mrs. Weaver brought water and a warm cloth, which Hazel accepted politely. Margaret sat across from her, waiting until Hazel seemed settled before speaking again. You said Mr. Grayson is your brother, Margaret began, but he didn't mention a sister in his letter. My brother prefers to solve problems without involving family, Hazel said with an amused sigh. But this could not be ignored. Margaret leaned forward. What needed such urgency? Hazel studied her for a long moment before answering. To explain that, I must tell you something about Elias. Margaret's chest tightened. All right. Elias, Hazel said softly, once worked for us. My brother hired him because he had a talent with horses unlike anyone I'd seen in years. Even my father would have admired his patience. Margaret felt warmth stir inside her, though she tried to keep her expression neutral. Hazel continued. He was quiet, hard-working, and devoted to the animals. But something happened, something that wounded him so deeply, he left without a word. Margaret swallowed. He told me there was a disagreement. Yes, Hazel murmured, but it wasn't truly about the disagreement, it was about the boy. Margaret's breath caught. The boy? Hazel nodded. A young apprentice named Samuel. He idolized Elias, followed him like a shadow. And one evening Samuel fell ill. A sudden fever. Elias was the one who found him. He stayed with him all night, but by morning... Hazel paused, her voice softening. The boy passed. Margaret froze. Hazel continued carefully. Elias blamed himself. He believed he should have noticed the signs earlier, should have insisted Samuel stop working that day, should have asked for help sooner. But he stayed with the boy, Margaret whispered. He didn't abandon him. No, Hazel said firmly. He never would. But grief does strange things. Elias left because he thought he failed Samuel, and because my brother, in his own grief, said things he later regretted. Margaret's heart ached at the picture forming in her mind. Elias alone with a dying boy, carrying the weight of that loss, running not from shame but from sorrow. Hazel folded her hands. The reason I insisted my brother send the letter is not because of the horse, though the animal is dear to us. I asked him to find Elias because Samuel's mother wants to speak to him. She does not blame him, she never has. She simply wants to tell him he is forgiven. Margaret's throat tightened. Forgiven? Yes, Hazel said gently. Before she grew too weak to speak much, she told me she dreamed of seeing Elias one more time. She wanted him to know that Samuel spoke kindly of him to the very end. Margaret pressed a hand to her chest. Oh. Hazel nodded softly. She asked my brother to find Elias if it was the last thing he did. Margaret felt tears prick behind her eyes. She hid them with practiced grace. "And the horse?" she asked. Hazel smiled faintly. "Old Jasper, Samuel's favourite. He's been failing, but when someone mentions Elias's name, he lifts his head. Old animals remember kindness longer than people do." Margaret's heart swelled painfully. "Elias didn't tell me any of this." "He wouldn't," Hazel said. "Not because he's hiding, but because grief quiets a man he carries too much alone." Margaret looked down at her hands. "Yes," she whispered. "He does." Hazel leaned forward. "May I ask you something, Miss Hollister?" "Of course. Do you care for him?" Margaret hesitated, but only for a breath. "Yes," she said softly. "I do." Hazel's expression warmed. "Then please believe me when I say this. Elias will return to you. He needs peace more than anything, and you appear to give him that." Margaret felt a flutter inside her, hope, fear, something fierce and gentle all at once. "I hope you're right." Hazel reached across the table and took her hand briefly. "I am." They sat quietly for a moment. The house was peaceful, the night calm. The ranch breathed around them, steady as a heartbeat. Hazel finished her water. "I won't trouble you further. I'll stay in town until my brother wires me about Elias's arrival. You are welcome to stay here tonight," Margaret offered. Hazel smiled. "You're kind, but I'll rest more easily in town, knowing Elias is already on his way." Margaret walked her to the door. When Hazel mounted her horse and rode off, the ranch felt still again. No dread, no mystery, only the echo of truths that had finally come to light. Margaret stepped out under the quiet night sky. The stars gleamed overhead, soft and steady. For the first time since Elias had left, she felt calm. He would return, he would face his past, and she would be here when he did. That knowledge filled her with a quiet, unexpected joy. She turned toward the house, ready at last to rest, ready for whatever tomorrow might bring. And deep in her heart, she knew the next moment she saw Elias Carter would change everything. Margaret awoke before dawn the next morning, long before the rooster sounded, and long before any ranch hand stirred. She dressed quickly, unable to shake the restless flutter in her chest. Hazel's visit had revealed more truth than she knew how to carry. Every word echoed inside her. "He carries too much alone. He will return to you. You appear to give him peace." Peace. Margaret wasn't sure she had ever given anyone such a thing. She had spent months surviving, managing, commanding, but peace, that was something different, something tender, something frightening. She stepped out onto the porch. The air held the crisp coolness of early morning, and the first streak of light touched the horizon. As she breathed it in, something in her loosened. For the first time since Elias had left, she felt hopeful. She had work to do. She checked the horses first, lingering with the stallion longer than necessary. The animal nudged her shoulder gently, as though sensing her quiet ache. "He'll be back," she whispered. The stallion snorted softly, almost in agreement. She smiled. Next, she checked the cattle, then walked the fence line, ensuring Elias's repairs held firm. They did. The posts stood straight and proud, a silent testament to his steady hands. By mid-morning, she had worn herself out with tasks she didn't truly need to do. Margaret finally forced herself to go inside, wash her hands, and attempt to read a book. She didn't get past a single page. Her mind kept drifting to Elias. Each hour felt both too fast and painfully slow. She wondered whether he had reached Abilene, whether Jasper had recognized him, whether Samuel's mother had found the peace she needed. She hoped more than anything that Elias had found peace too. Near noon she walked out to the porch again, unable to remain still. Mrs. Weaver joined her, handing her a cup of tea. "You're anxious," the housekeeper said gently. "I'm not," Margaret tried. Mrs. Weaver raised a brow. "Child, you've cleaned the pantry shelves twice. You're anxious." Margaret sighed, accepting the truth. "I want him to return safely." "He will. And I want him to, I want him to come back with a lighter heart." Mrs. Weaver smiled knowingly. "Then let him find you waiting. That's all a man like that needs." Margaret looked toward the empty road stretching into the distance. "I hope it is enough." Mrs. Weaver squeezed her arm. "For him? It will be." Hours passed. The sun drifted low in the sky, warm and golden. Ranch hands began their evening chores. Horses stamped softly in their paddocks. Life moved on. But Margaret's gaze remained fixed on the road. Just as she began to accept that Elias would not return tonight, a faint dust trail stirred in the distance. She froze. No, it couldn't be. The shape grew clearer, the unmistakable outline of a horse and rider, approaching steadily. Margaret set her cup down so quickly it nearly tipped over. Her breath escaped in a single word. "Elias!" She stepped off the porch, heart slamming in her chest. Her hands trembled despite her efforts to appear calm. The rider drew nearer. She recognized the familiar posture, the way he held the reins, the quiet confidence in every movement. It was him. Elias slowed his horse to a gentle trot as he approached the house. Dust clung to him from the long ride, his shirt rumpled, his hair wind-tossed. But his eyes, those warm, steady eyes, found her instantly. Margaret stopped a few feet away from the horse, afraid her legs might give out if she stepped closer. He dismounted slowly, his boots touching the ground with a quiet thud. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Elias reached up and removed his hat. "I came back," he said softly. Margaret's breath shook. "You said you would. I meant it." She swallowed hard. "How was Abilene?" He stepped closer, close enough she could see the faint sadness still lingering in his eyes. "Hard, but right. Samuel's mother?" she asked quietly. "I saw her," he said. She could barely speak. But she held my hand and told me I wasn't to carry that burden anymore. Margaret's eyes burned. "And the horse?" A faint smile touched his lips. Old Jasper recognized me. He lifted his head, looked at me like he used to. I think he just wanted to say goodbye. She pressed a hand to her chest. "You gave them comfort." Elias shook his head. "They gave me forgiveness." For a moment, neither of them moved. The sunset bathed the ranch in warm light, softening every edge around them. Then Elias took a slow breath. "Margaret, I need to tell you something more." She braced herself. "What is it?" He stepped closer, close enough she felt the warmth of him, close enough the air between them shifted with every heartbeat. "When I left, I wasn't sure of myself. I wasn't sure what my place here was, or what I meant to you." Margaret's voice wavered. "I wasn't sure either. But I knew one thing," Elias continued, "that this ranch felt like home, more than any place I've ever been. And you made it feel that way." Her breath caught. "Elias!" He reached out slowly, giving her time to refuse. When she didn't, he gently took her hand. Margaret felt her heartbeat thrum wildly against her ribs. "When I was riding back," he said, his voice low and steady, "I realized something I should have known the moment I arrived. I didn't come here because of a contract, or because I needed a place to work. I came here because somehow, without knowing it, I was looking for you." Tears stung her eyes. She shook her head lightly. "You can't say things like that unless you mean them." "I mean every word." Her voice trembled. "Elias, I don't know how to—" He squeezed her hand. "Then let me start." He stepped even closer, so close she felt the warmth of him across her skin. "When I left this ranch, I kept thinking of you," he said softly. "Your strength, your grace, your stubbornness, and the way you look at the world as though it might collapse but you refuse to let it. I kept thinking that if I had anything worth offering, I wanted to offer it to you." Margaret felt her breath falter. "Elias." "And I realized," he whispered, "that I don't want to walk through life as your hired hand, or your guest, or your burden." She swallowed. "Then what do you want to be?" He lifted her hand to his chest, right over his heartbeat. "Your partner," he said. "In work, in decisions, in life." Her knees weakened. She steadied herself by gripping his arm. His voice softened. "Margaret Hollister, may I have the honor of being your husband? Not by agreement, not by arrangement, but by love." For a full moment she could not speak. The world blurred. The ranch faded. Only Elias remained, steady and patient, waiting for her heart to catch up to his words. When her voice finally returned, it came as a whisper. "Yes." Elias's breath trembled out of him. "Yes, yes," she repeated, stronger now. 1,000 times yes. A soft, joyful laugh escaped him, quiet but full of relief. He cupped her face gently, reverently, as if afraid she might vanish. Margaret leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering closed. He lowered his forehead to hers. "May I kiss you?" She nodded, breathless. "Please." Their lips met softly, slow at first, as though both feared breaking the moment. Then deeper, warmer, filled with the emotion they had both tried so hard to hide. Margaret's hands lifted to his shoulders, steadying herself as the weight of months melted into one breathtaking moment. When they finally parted, she felt light, buoyant, alive. Elias inhaled shakily, brushing a stray curl from her cheek. "I love you." Margaret's eyes shone. "I love you too." The words felt natural, free, true as the earth beneath them. From the porch, Mrs. Weaver gasped softly, then smiled wide before slipping back inside to give them privacy. A few ranch hands pretended not to stare as they continued their chores with suspiciously bright grins. Elias touched Margaret's cheek again. "Ready for the rest of our lives?" She laughed, the sound full of joy. More than ready. They walked toward the house together, hand in hand. The stallion whinnied gently from the stable as if offering approval. The sky glowed deep gold, wrapping the ranch in a warm embrace. For the first time in months, Margaret felt safe, not because she finally had help, but because she had found a man who chose her heart as surely as she chose his. As they reached the porch steps, Elias paused and looked down at her. "Margaret," he murmured, his voice filled with love and certainty, "you'll never face another dawn alone." And she knew, without a single doubt, that it was true. Thank you so much for listening to this story all the way to the end. We hope it moved you as much as it moved us while telling it. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave us a comment telling us where you're listening from and what you liked the most. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What score would you give it? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like as a show of support. That really motivates us to keep creating and sharing more stories full of emotion and life lessons. And before we go, we want to remind you that an exciting and heartwarming story recommendation will appear on the final screen. If you'd like to enjoy it, just click on the video. Thank you once again for being here, and we'll see you in the next story.